Hello, Transformers. Welcome back to our Wine About Data podcast. I'm Danae Green, a project consultant at Transform Consulting Group, and I am joined by our founder and president, Amanda Lopez.
Hi, Danae.
Hey. So once again, we're here to talk about data and wine, some of our favorite things.
Yes.
Do you know what wine we have today?
Yeah. So I have another beautiful wine from Michigan. So Baroda Founders in Southwest Michigan. It's a Chardonnay. So if you love Chardonnay, this would be a great wine summer, any time of year. So I love it.
All right. Grab your glass of wine or your coffee or your drink of choice. Once again, this is just meant to be a fun conversation around data. And for us, we love wine. We decided to throw that in for fun. But today, really, the key thing that we're going to have a conversation around is the logic model. And so,
I know you're excited.
Am I excited? We've had a few conversations off camera.
Yes.
And so I actually think this conversation will be really fun.
Yeah.
But the goal here with this conversation around the logic model is really to give you one less thing to whine about after we're done today. All right, Amanda, let's hop in. I guess really, what is a logic model?
I know. And it has probably the worst name ever. So let's just start there and name it and own it, right? Because as you like to say, it's not logical.
It's not always as logical.
No, but it does make sense. So when we do trainings and we do work with nonprofits, we love to just say a logic model is basically your organization's business plan. So it's, there you go. I know. Say it's your organizational plan or your program plan. And that's essentially what it is. It helps to align the activities, the programs that you're doing with the impact, the results that you want. In the private sector, a business creates a business plan saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z product or service, and we're going to make this much money because their impact is the dollar, right? In the nonprofit sector, we're going to do X, Y, Z programs. And if we do these things, then this change will happen. So in the simplest of terms, maybe call the logic model a business plan and think about it as like the roadmap for your organization.
I love that because that resonates with me. Like I went to business school. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So in my curriculum, we weren't talking logic models.
No.
That was not the term. And so sometimes when you get into this and I'm like, so wait, what are we doing again? Like, how does this work? So I love that it's like the business plan.
Maybe we need to just champion a name change and then public sector from logic model.
No logic model, business plan.
Nonprofit business plan, whatever you want to call that.
Okay, I like it. Let's champion it. Yeah. And I think we could get that done. With all the impact we have nationally. Let's do it. All right. So I guess the question is, let's take that a little deeper. We know what it is. It's a business plan, but really, why do you need the logic model?
Yes. Right. So if you think back to any organization in the public sector, when they first started, there's a mission, there's a need that they're trying to serve in a community, right? If you set up a food pantry or food backpack program for kids, you're working to address hunger, right? So there is a need. If you're doing a tutoring program, you're wanting to close that academic achievement gap. So the logic model is really we call it also another jargony term, theory of change. It's your theory of change. So if we do this intervention, this service, providing backpacks to kids on Friday after school so they have food for the weekend, then we're helping to decrease hunger, right? Or whatever the ultimate goal is that you're wanting to have a purpose for. So the logic model helps to flush out that theory of change for you. And you can see different templates. We have some templates online and we have blogs that we've written about on our website too to break it down. But really there's a couple of key components that you have in your logic model. And again, it really flushes it out for an organization or a program. So the first column you would see is your inputs. What are the resources that it takes to implement your program, your intervention? So again, going along with this food backpack program, right? You might need food. You're going to need food. You're going to need materials like the backpacks. You're going to need volunteers or staff to fill them up. And how much does that cost, right? And so that's maybe what a funder would see is the number of staff, the number of volunteers, the curriculum, the materials, the resources to do the next column, which is activities. And so this is the things that you're going to do. We're going to deliver backpacks once a week on a Friday, and we're going to do it over however many weeks of a school year, right? Whatever those things are. If we're doing a tutoring program, we're going to do tutoring every day. So kids are going to be in a tutoring program school year and they're going to get 30 minutes a day of tutoring. And so it's very, we say we'd like to be explicit and not really specific in spelling it out. Don't be general. This is where we get very detailed. And again, that's what you would do in a business plan.
Right.
You would say very specifically, what are you going to do? Your specific organization, what is the activity? So we've got inputs, we've got activities, and now we're going to start to talk about, okay, what's going to happen if we do these things? So the first column is outputs.
Which I feel like that's is more normal
Yes.
for
and
the
that's-
industry.
I feel like that's really common, right? So
Yeah.
now you're going to say, we think about outputs and touches. What are the things that we touch? How many kids are going to get backpacks? Maybe how much food? You could talk about the number of pounds of food that you might deliver, maybe the number of school partners, but what are all the like touches that you will have related to that? So what's the outputs? And then the last column or category is outcomes. We'll do another episode to break down further outputs and outcomes. But simply, outcomes are going to be what's the change that we hope to see as a result of doing these things. So again, it's the if-then logic. So if I deliver backpacks to kids on Friday for food for the weekend all year, then what do we hope to happen? Kids will not go hungry. They're going to come to school on Monday and they're going to be more ready to learn. And hopefully, longer term, we're going to see maybe increased academic performance or maybe a decrease of behavior because they're hungry and tired. And so now they have the food and nutrition they need, and so they can be more focused in school. So your outcomes, you could do what we call short term.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, that immediate results, and then also think more long term, like aspirational change that your program has. And so you can see with this logic model framework that you can align your programs and activities to the change that you want to have, the outcomes and impacts.
So we got like inputs, activities, like
Outputs, and then outcomes.
outputs, and then outcomes. And outcomes could be short or long term even. But this is really like a one-page document.
It's a one-page document. Yes.
So it's not even this robust thing.
Right.
Even.
Try again because we want to be really focused. I think the exercise of doing a logic model is a really great way to focus and refine your purpose and intentionality. So we've seen, and we do these for maybe a nonprofit organization that's organization-wide, and then by each program or like department or service.
So you could have multiple logic models.
You could have multiple logic models. And if you do that, your program logic models, right, roll up and they align. So organizationally, there's like maybe for this one client that I'm thinking of, they have 5 long-term outcomes and aspirational goals that they're working towards. They're helping students graduate high school and ultimately complete post-secondary education.
Okay.
So they have, how percentage of students who complete high school, percentage of students who enroll in college in the first year, who complete and enroll in second year, and then complete post-secondary all the way, whatever their credential is, and then are in the workforce. And then they have multiple programs that do different things that help accomplish that, right? And so at the end of each program's logic model, those 5 long-term goals are going to align and be in their logic model.
Oh, that's actually like beautiful.
It is. And I think when it can be a tedious process because again, we're really refining, right? And getting really clear and making sure that there is good alignment of that. But then there's so much more clarity for all the teams, all the departments, and the organization.
Yeah.
There's that clear focus.
Yeah. And I just think too, going into meetings or having conversations and really having a one-page document to guide. And we talked about all of these things in all these episodes really around like bringing data into conversations. And I think a logic model is a key tool to help facilitate that as well. And I think a lot of times too, nonprofit and being a former just in the trenches day-to-day practitioner, we communicate a lot of outputs. I know that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
This logic model really moves us towards that outcome conversation. And so maybe even just expand a little bit on that, like moving from talking about outputs to outcome.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So what we try to do with a client and helping them move in that direction, we say, okay, so let's say you're serving 100 students with backpacks. So what?
Love that question.
Okay, so what do you want to happen as a result of that happening? And then they start to tell you like what they think they want to happen. And so we say, okay, those are your outcomes. So let's talk about that, right? And outcome progression, and I know we'll talk about this a lot more, which I love to talk about. But short term, tends to be like that immediate change is like knowledge, understanding, attitude, like that's where we start with some of the changes. And then once we have that knowledge, attitude, and whatever, then we're going to start to move towards behavior change. And then that's when you can start to see it show up in changes of how people are interacting with each other, whatever that program or intervention it is that you're doing. Going back to a nonprofit that might be tutoring kids, right? So the first short-term outcome might be now students know about the fundamentals of reading and maybe how to read, and they have some tools and skills to do that. And they're learning habits of reading on their own or studying, whatever those. So they're learning that knowledge. Then the next step might be, okay, now we're going to see a change in maybe grades. We're going to see a change in assessment scores, right?
Right.
So that change in behavior isn't going to be immediate. But that also, I think, gives good clarity for a nonprofit to track some milestones along the way. Because it's hard to control. Like, what can we be responsible? Because working with humans is messy, and they come to us with a lot of needs and issues.
And sometimes they piggyback off your organization is serving one thing or help you do, but there's so many
other factors
that are like
that influence that.
Yeah. And I'm like, am I responsible for all of that? But then how do I measure the things that I am responsible for? Because you can't be everything to everybody.
100%. And I think that's where sometimes we go so big because we think maybe that's what the funders want or that's what we want, but then that's not realistic, right? And I think, again, the exercise of the logic model really helps you to, again, focus in. And we like to say, what can you own and be responsible for? And what can you also celebrate if it goes well? And so those guidelines can help us focus in on those outcomes.
And then what are the tools and the things that you need to actually prove that, right?
Right. Because then, the next thing, so sometimes our logic model tools, we might have a bottom at the end that'll say the data source.
Yeah.
So then after we have those outputs and outcomes, now we're going to say, okay, where do we get those?
Right. How do we actually get to these outcomes?
Right.
And we move that
and again, that's such a nice tool for staff and everybody to just have it all in one place.
Yeah. What a dream that would be. And I really do feel like that logic model, I've heard about it. I feel like the most I heard about it when I was in the industry was around grants.
Yes.
Typically.
That's right.
But it really isn't just about grants.
Yes. You don't have to wait for a funder to ask you for a logic model for your program or your organization. It is a great exercise to do and to have in place for everybody. But you can imagine why a funder would want one, right? Because you think about it, a funder is like an investor in your program. And so they want to see what's the return on that investment. Right. If you think about it from that business perspective. And so that's often why grant applications ask for a logic model as a part of. And then once you have your logic model, then your organization's really set up to do an evaluation.
Right.
Because now we have clarity of what it is that we're working towards. We know the activities that support this. And so and we know the tools that we're going to collect to get that data.
Yep.
So now we can start to report out on how are we doing against these metrics.
I know. And I just brought me a couple different thoughts when you were talking.
Yeah.
One of them was like, sometimes when you're doing a homework assignment, like back in college, like 10 papers was easier than a 1 page. So this really makes us really start to say, what is it that we really want to measure? And then the other thought I had was just, once again, I always put on that like fundraiser, marketing hat. And I just think this goes into like data storytelling and really being able to communicate your impact that you have. And like the logic model, I feel like is a kind of a launch pad for some of those things long term.
Right. And I feel like everybody, we know that. We just don't have it all mapped in one place. Right. And the beauty of going through the exercise, this happens in two different ways. One, you already have existing programs. So you're working backwards in a way because now you have to put the logic model together after you've already started. Yep. And so we're piecemealing it together. But then it's a great way to make sure all the activities we are doing do align. And so sometimes doing this exercise with an organization, they might realize, oh, we don't really have a measure focus on this activity. So either A, is that activity important? Or B, let's put a measure in place so we know that there's a change that we're hoping to have as a result of that. Another great time to do a logic model as if you're designing something new.
Ooh,
Yes.
which we all love that.
Exactly. And again, think about a startup or whatnot, but this is where you can really work backwards. So if you're designing a new program, what's the change we want to happen? We're doing this intervention because we see a need with a specific population or in a community. So let's first start there and say, okay, what's the change? What's the outcomes, the results that we want to achieve? And then let's work backwards and say, okay, what are the activities we will deliver to then support accomplishing those? And then what are the resources that we need to do this?
Yeah. And, just going back to the days, like there's always a lot to do in our nonprofit world. And so I think the more we can get clear and reduce some of that confusion and say we either need to do this activity or we don't need to do it, or this is really important. I think that goes a long way for a lot of my nonprofit day-to-day friends.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the storytelling.
Yeah, which we always love to do that at the end, right?
Absolutely.
But then it sets us up for like true evaluation and quality and continuous quality improvement processes, which is also a key part. It's not just about telling the story, although that's the fun part, right? So I guess if you had one key takeaway, Amanda, when it comes to this conversation, what would it be?
So think of a logic model is your organization's business plan or your program's business plan. And you need it to know this is why we're doing what we're doing, and this is what we hope to accomplish as a result of that.
So there you go. You heard it. We're starting the trend, and we're championing a new name for the logic model.
Yes.
We're going to call it your blueprint and your roadmap and strategic plan and business plan for your organization there. So I love that. All right. As always, you can check out our show notes and look at our resources, subscribe to our newsletter, and follow us on social media, and you get more tips and information along the way, as one of our passions is to bring you guys relatable and application-based content to you all as you're out doing amazing things. In the meantime, I guess it's like cheers to you and all the transformative work you're doing in your communities.